Hi, this is Amber Street. I'm going to read a couple episodes from my series Calls to the Dead. Now, originally Calls to the Dead was supposed to be a thriller since I do write several thrillers. But as the story unfolded, it turned more into a humorous genre, so I changed it. Originally, Calls to the Dead was about a young boy named Harris Humes who found an old black antique phone in an abandoned shed on his grandmother's farm in Central California, only to discover that with this phone he was able to call and talk to the dead. Here's the story. Harris Humes was thrilled to spend summers with his grandmother Betty Humes, who lived in Central California. Harris was 13 years old and had light brown hair and brown eyes. He had spent the past 3 summers at his grandmother's farm and had made friends with 2 other boys that lived nearby. Harris had just arrived the night before and was busy watching his grandmother make homemade banana bread. Betty was 84 years old and had gray hair and brown eyes. She was wearing a white muumuu dress with giant blue flowers on it, and she had her hair rolled in pink foam curlers. "Harris, would you please get a bag of chocolate chips out of the pantry for me?" Betty asked as she mixed the flour, sugar, eggs, and bananas together along with the other ingredients. "You're making banana bread with chocolate chips?" Harris asked. "You've never done that before," he said with a smile. "Well, it's never too late to try something new, young man. I got the idea from the church bake sale last month, and I've been wanting to try it. I think that you are going to love it." Harris smiled. His grandmother was a great cook, and everything that she baked was better than anyone else's baking. Harris got the bag of chocolate chips out of the pantry and handed them to his grandmother. "I like anything chocolate," Harris said as he watched his grandmother open the bag and pour more than half of it in the bowl. Betty smiled at Harris and then lightly touched the tip of his nose. "I know you do. That's why I am making them." Betty stirred the batter a couple of times, outside of wanting to make them for myself. She finished mixing the batter and poured it into 2 greased bread pans and carefully placed them into the oven. "Grandma?" Harris asked. "Yes, dear." Betty closed the oven door and took the mixing bowl and spoon over to the sink and washed them. "Can Billy and Glenn come over Friday night and spend the night?" Harris asked. "Billy and Glenn are very nice boys. They come from good families." "Of course they can," Betty said with a grin. She loved having people over. "Thank you, Grandma. I will send them a text message and tell them that you said it's okay," Harris said with a smile. "What would you boys like for dinner?" Betty asked. "Oh, I don't know. I don't want you to go through any trouble," Harris said. "Oh, nonsense. It's never any trouble to wait on those we love," Betty said with a smile. Harris looked at the kitchen table, which was covered in a red tablecloth, and then walked over to it and sat down. Betty followed him and sat down next to him. "I'm not sure what we will feel like. We are going to do some exploring in the daytime." Betty smiled. "Oh, some exploring, huh? What are you boys going to explore?" Harris thought about it for a moment. "Well, we are going to go down to the creek and follow it for a little way and try to find the old Indian village that Uncle Sid told us about when he was here last summer. And then we are going to explore your farm." "My farm?" Betty asked in amusement. Harris smiled. "Sure, why not? There's a lot of interesting things here. There's the barn and some really old oak trees, and there's the old shed over by the path that leads to the creek." Betty touched Harris's chin. "Oh, I see. Well, you boys be careful and don't follow the creek too far or fall in." "We won't. I don't think there's very much water in it if it's anything like last summer," Harris said. "Well, it rained a lot over the winter, so the creek should still be fairly full." "Cool. I think that you should bring Duke with you. I really don't like the idea of you boys walking through the woods alone." "Okay, Grandma." Duke was Betty's golden retriever, who was sound asleep in the living room and for once not supervising in the kitchen. Friday finally arrived, and Harris, Duke, Glenn, and Billy started their evening midday instead of at dinner time. "I don't know what I was thinking," Harris said with a grin as the boys made their way to the creek. "I really wouldn't want to go exploring at night," Harris said with a laugh. The first stop was the old shed. The boys went inside of it with Duke. "What is this?" Glenn asked as he picked up an old black antique rotary dial phone. "That's an old phone," Billy said. "I can see that," Glenn said. "Then why did you ask what it was?" Billy asked. Glenn shrugged his shoulders and said, "I don't know. I guess that's just what people do when they find things." Harris and Billy laughed. "Why don't we leave it here for now?" Harris said. "We can get it on our way back from exploring the creek and try to make some calls on it tonight." "Okay," Glenn said as he set the phone back down. The boys took Duke, who was on a leash, along the creek for about a half of a mile. When the boys didn't discover anything interesting, they turned around and headed back to the shed that was on Betty's farm. Harris picked up the phone, and the three boys walked back to the house with it and Duke. When they got in the house, Betty had already put 2 homemade pizzas in the oven. "Why don't you boys get cleaned up and play for about an hour, and then you can eat dinner early," Betty suggested. "Okay," Harris said. Just then, Betty noticed the phone. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "It was in your shed. We are going to plug it in after dinner and see if it works," Harris answered. "Okay, but no prank phone calls. Call people that you know," Betty said as she took off her apron. "Okay," Harris said. Harris, Glenn, and Billy took Duke's leash off and left him in the kitchen with Betty, and then went down the hall to wash their hands. Then they went to Harris's room and played video games while the pizza was cooking. Once they had dinner, the boys went back to Harris's room and got the phone and brought it up to the attic. "You have a phone line in here?" Glenn asked. Harris nodded. "Can you believe that? There's a phone line in the attic, but not in my room. Well, the room that I stay in when I am here," Harris said as he plugged in the phone. Billy looked around the attic. "It looks like it used to be somebody's room." "Yeah, I guess," Harris said. The boys tried calling several people that they knew, but no one answered until the 9th call. Then a man answered. "Hello," he said. "Hi, who is this?" Harris asked. Harris's uncle recognized Harris's voice and thought that he would play a joke. "This is President George Washington." "What? He is dead," Harris said and hung up. He told Billy and Glenn what the man had said. "I guess that I dialed the wrong number." "Well, try the number again. Maybe the wires got crossed," Billy suggested. "Okay," Harris said. He dialed the number again. This time his aunt answered, but she had disguised her voice after hearing what her husband had done. They loved practical jokes. "Hello?" "Hi," Harris said. "Who is this?" "This is Martha Washington," his aunt joked. "Oh, okay," Harris said before he hung up. Harris unplugged the phone and looked at Billy and Glenn. "This isn't any fun. Let's go downstairs and get some banana bread. It has chocolate chips in it." "Okay," Glenn and Billy said in unison. The 3 boys went downstairs to the kitchen. "Well, did the phone work?" Betty asked. Harris looked at her and said, "I don't know. It only seemed to reach dead people." Calls to the Dead, Episode 3. The Quirky Guy. Sylvester Robbins was a 30-year-old man with dark brown hair and brown eyes. He worked as an accountant at a local accounting firm. And even though he wasn't really that different from anyone else, he had a quirky side that got him the nickname the Quirky Guy. What made Sylvester so quirky was that he liked ants. He had an ant farm at home and one that he had brought into work and set on his desk. It was relatively small. It was plastic, 12 inches wide, 1 inch thick, and 7 inches tall. Watching the ants was a way for Sylvester to relax. He would stop his work and watch them crawl around. Another quirky thing that Sylvester did was to talk to himself. He would ask himself questions and then answer them, whereas most people who thought out loud would just speak a few words or thoughts. All in all, Sylvester was a pretty likable guy. However, the boss, Mr. Mike Doobie, felt the need to keep Sylvester out of the office whenever a really big client would come in. Sylvester would always find a way to embarrass everyone in the company, including Mike. "Sylvester, why don't you work from home tomorrow?" Mike would ask the day before the big client would come in. "Okay," Sylvester would say. He was a very easygoing guy and never questioned anything. and he never wondered why he was being asked to work from home. "Is he autistic?" one of his coworkers asked the man sitting next to her in a whisper during a meeting one day, after Sylvester spent 10 minutes sharpening and rearranging a handful of pencils that were on the conference room table. "I don't think so," he said. "I think that is just his personality." One day, Sylvester forgot that he had been asked to work at home that day, so he went into work like other days. Mike saw him in the hallway but couldn't say anything to him because the really important client was standing right next to him. Everyone went into the conference room, including Sylvester, Mike, and the client whose name was Brenda Stormwood. She had bright red hair and blue eyes and was 30 years old. "Hello, Miss Stormwood," Sylvester said as everyone sat down at the conference room table. "My name is Sylvester." Brenda looked at Sylvester and smiled. "Hello, Sylvester." Everyone held their breath, including Mike. Would Sylvester say something to embarrass them all? Everyone looked at Sylvester. Sylvester was oblivious to his boss and co-workers' looks. "Would you like to see my ant farm before you leave?" Sylvester asked. Mike almost slapped the conference room table with his hand. He was so upset by Sylvester's seemingly childish question. The rest of the employees at the table gasped. Both Sylvester and Brenda were oblivious to the gasps. "Do you have an ant farm?" Brenda asked. Everyone's eyes went from Sylvester to Brenda. Everyone held their breaths again. Sylvester smiled and said, "Yes, I have a large ant farm at home, but I have a small one here at work on my desk." "Well, Sylvester, I would love to see it before I leave today," Brenda said with a smile. Everyone wondered if it was a genuine smile or a forced one. They all stared at Brenda's mouth. She noticed. Brenda looked at Mike and the rest of the employees and asked, "Is something wrong?" Mike and the rest of the employees all shook their heads quickly. "No," said Mike. "We just weren't sure if you would be interested in an ant farm." "Oh, absolutely," Brenda said. "I have 2 at home." Thank you for listening. The link to the series is under the description of the video. Have a great day.